This morning, I left my community of Baltimore, a drug-infested area, where a lot of the drugs that we're talking about today have already taken the lives of so many children. The same children that I watched 14 or 15 years ago as they grew up, now walking around like zombies.
Well, that was Congressman Elijah Cummings during a hearing back in 1999. His description of Baltimore, a city he represents, echoing President Trump's recent tweets about the city that have come under harsh criticism. Let's bring in the A-team. Jessica Tarlov, a Fox News contributor, Jenna Rives, Trump 2020 Advisory Board member, and Dan Henninger, Wall Street Journal editorial page deputy editor, also a Fox News contributor. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Dan, start us off here. I mean, there are some similarities for sure between what we heard from Cummings then and what the president's saying today.
Yeah, there certainly are. I mean, they're talking about Baltimore, but, you know, what has gone on the past week are these charges back and forth over racism and where the president is racist. And it has struck me, Sandra, this word is becoming kind of an abstraction. We should talk about the realities in cities like Baltimore. One of the realities is going back to 1964 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and in the 60s, you had race riots across America in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Newark, New York, Indianapolis, Baltimore, Kansas City. Over 55 years, all of those cities have been under Democratic control, with no Republicans running any of those cities, with the exception of New York, for 55 years. And to this day, you have failing schools. You have public housing that is falling apart. The FBI's most recent crime statistics puts most of those cities as the top 10 most violent cities in the United States. It strikes me that that is the real racism, is a racism of political failure. And the Democrats, to try to offload all of this on Donald Trump, suggest they are aware of the failure and they want to change the subject.
Jessica?
I disagree with the idea that this is trying to offload this onto Donald Trump. I am more than happy to have a conversation about policies that have failed in this country, how we can work to do better. The issue here is a long history of racism from this president, going back to his days running buildings in New York City where he wouldn't let African Americans rent there, him and his father, Fred Trump. I was discussing this rather passionately yesterday. I mean, this is a man who is a birther. This is a man who still thinks the Central Park Five is guilty. And the real issue with what he did about Baltimore, he was only talking about it because Elijah Cummings had pissed him off. And when he said no human would want to live there, that is so different than what Elijah Cummings was talking about there. He was talking about needing help for his city and to improve the quality of life, not dehumanizing the people who live there. There are many cities in this country that have a lower median income. This Elijah Cummings district, 61st percentile. There are poorer cities, like Kentucky's 5th, for instance, Mick Mulvaney's district in South Carolina.
Make your point because Jenna needs to get in there.
My point is that we can talk about the president's racism and we can talk about improving cities, and that we shouldn't allow
Perhaps that's getting lost in all this. Where's the solution? How do we fix Baltimore?
Well, and that's exactly what's getting lost, because while Jessica is saying she wants to talk about policy, nobody actually is talking about policy. They then pivot and then say, oh, let's talk about the president's so-called history of racism. And so what's not being talked about is the fact that this type of attack against Baltimore is saying, let's find the truth here. Let's look at what's going on in America and let's bring this to light. No one was talking about Baltimore until President Trump actually shined the light on it. And now everyone is talking about it. You have all of these reporters who are going in and actually seeing, I mean, Benny Arthur Johnson from TPUSA actually went in and was talking to these people who were thankful to give their story. And so when you actually look at what, when people are just claiming racism, that is a ridiculous low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I just want to add, in an hour, the Maryland Governor, Larry Hogan, is going to be in our program here. He has not done a television interview since this Baltimore blow-up occurred, so we'll get his feelings next hour. But I want to move on to last night, because I think the last 2 nights were very revealing. You can pick a side, you can pick a candidate, whatever you want. Here's how David Axelrod summed up Joe Biden's performance in round 2.
I think the good news for Joe Biden is this was maybe the best he could do. And the bad news is this may be the best he could do. He was much better than last time. He was much more engaged. But I agree with these guys. He had moments in which he was uncertain, where he was on the defensive. And the main thing is he was the guy who was going to take on Trump and bring it to Trump and restore values and decency.
That's how Axelrod scored it. How'd you score it, Dan?
Something like that, though I thought Biden did a lot better than he did in the first debate, and I thought he survived this one. I mean, they are talking as though what they want is a street fight with Donald Trump. They're building Donald Trump into somebody who's 60 feet tall. That's all they talk about. It's a long time before the presidential campaign comes, a year from November. They seem to be suggesting that the only one willing to fight with Trump is Elizabeth Warren. But Elizabeth Warren represents a politics, I think, that is going to take the Democrats back to 1972 and a wipeout of the sort that George McGovern suffered at the hands of Richard Nixon. She cannot possibly win with the extreme policy she is pushing.
Wow. Karl Rove had this to say in the Wall Street Journal. Democrats' big ideas may re-elect Donald Trump. From Medicare to all the Green New Deal, candidates work hard to repel swing voters. Talks about Biden's strong performance, to your point, Dan, and solid front-runner status. It's clear that the party seismically shifted away from the centrist Democratic Party of the 1990s, making his path to the nomination far from certain.
I think Biden had a strong performance last night. I think that the other candidates on the stage actually treated Biden and Kamala Harris as the front runner. She took her fair amount of incoming. The first kind of 20 minutes on healthcare was actually a pile on her more than it was about Joe Biden. One point that I've seen making the rounds that I think is important is that Democrats need to take stock of how popular President Obama is. There was a lot of running away from him from people who had worked in the administration.
How did he fall out of favor so fast, Jessica?
No,
how'd that happen?
I think there's just a more elegant
Can anyone
way
help us here?
I don't think that he fell out of favor.
I mean, they are all Democrats. Well, I guess with the exception of Sanders, they are all Democrats, aren't they, Jenna?
Yeah, and so, you know, what I'm seeing here, too, is that the Democratic Party is having an identity crisis, and they are pivoting so far left just to be anti-Trump that they have to really take stock of what policies they're actually running on, because they are running away from a good economy. They are running away from low unemployment. They're running away from capitalism. They're saying, you know, let's give everything for free. I mean, John Stossel actually took stock of if you had the policies and implemented of what every Democrat was running. I mean, this would cost the American people. Let's recognize that the American government is not a revenue-generating institution. So this is coming out of your and my pocket. And so when the Democrats are all going so far, that's what radicalism is.
Doug Schoen is making this point at FoxNews.com.
And I have to correct myself because it's funny. I combined Karl Rove with Doug Schoen, and it's interesting because what Doug Schoen's comments would have sounded like, oh, Rove.
Well, there might be an app for that, but we haven't built it yet.
The Obama's
what would that look like?
Obama's role here is very mysterious. I mean, I regard Barack Obama as the most left-wing president of the post-war period. I mean, he really was a man of the left. His people, Tom Perez, his labor secretary, the current Democratic National Committee chairman, was a man of the left. And why the current edition of the Progressive Party and the Democrats thinks he wasn't left enough suggests to me, as I was saying earlier, that they are pushing that party so far to the left that they simply are not going to be able to run down the center in a general election against Donald Trump.
I think that's certainly an argument you could make about Elizabeth Warren if she were to capture the nomination. And I'm a tremendous fan of the campaign that she's running. I think that she is unabashedly authentic and believes in her policies, and she looks like she's having fun with it, which is something to be said in contrast to a Bernie Sanders that seems a little more lectury. But Joe Biden is the clear front runner here. He's up 15 to 20 points no matter what poll you look at, and he's running on a moderate platform that is building on the accomplishments of President Obama. He uses the word Obamacare. He talks about,
but he's not actually moderate when he's saying let's get rid of fossil fuels. Let's do
Jenna,
all of this. Let's give government provided health care. When he's talking about all of these policies.
But it's not Green No Deal. It's not Medicare for all.
Back to Rose's piece one more time, and then we're going to wrap this up. All right. Democrats' big ideas may re-elect Trump. He goes on to make the point, from Medicare for all to Green New Deal, candidates work hard to repel swing voters. They're the ones who are going to determine this thing. They're in Michigan. The president beat Hillary Clinton by that much in Michigan 3 years ago.
Yeah, and
does this turn people off in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Missouri.
And I think that President Trump and with his policies are resonating. I mean, people like us who are so steeped in the politics are looking at it and analyzing it and dissecting every little thing. What voters in Michigan and all of these states are recognizing, when you have the average American who wakes up every day with better taxes, with low unemployment, with the high economy, and when they're actually looking at what President Trump has done for America, they're excited. I mean, we see this at the rallies. We see this even at the polls, and I'm not a fan of the polls. You all know that. I speak about the polls all the time. But if you look at every other metric here, President Trump is the clear front runner.
Another rally tonight, by the way. Did anybody else, I know you see Biden as the front runner, make a clear move in the past 2 nights for you, Jessica? Final thoughts?
I think Elizabeth Warren did. I think that she'll continue her ascension. I think that Steve Bullock is a very good addition to this race. We'll see how it all shakes out, but I think he made himself a clear and important moderate voice on the first night. He's running, obviously, in a Trump state and knows how to get that done. But there are a lot more reasons for President Trump.
Thank you. Right on, Jessica, Jenna, Dan, nice to see you.